Ron Howard has long been perceived as one of Hollywood's greatest success stories. To many Americans, he is a symbol of the rare child actor who not only survived the industry, but flourished within it, moving seamlessly from Opie Taylor to Richie Cunningham to one of modern filmmaking's most respected directors. His career, marked by consistency, discipline, and a wholesome public image, has often served as proof that talent, decency, and hard work still count for something in Hollywood. But behind this familiar picture of the friendly, baseball cap-wearing filmmaker lies a far more complex, deeply human story that Howard has only recently begun to share. Despite his reputation as Hollywood's most dependable hitmaker, he has faced personal crises, career setbacks, and moments of profound self-doubt that never made it into the public narrative. For decades, Howard's colleagues have marveled at how well he managed to project the image of the consummate professional, the director who always had everything under control. Yet the few people closest to him knew he had fought through painful chapters that would surprise most people who grew up watching him on their television screens. In recent interviews and in his memoir, he has begun speaking candidly about these hidden struggles, discussing family pressures, creative failures, and the personal sacrifices that shaped both his life and his work. These revelations tell the story of a man not defined by effortless success, but of one who made difficult choices and private emotional sacrifices even when the world thought he was living a charmed life. One of the most defining moments in this lesser-known personal journey came in 1991, when Howard made a decision he would later describe as one of his deepest regrets. Professionally, he was on the cusp of a major stride forward. Coming off successes with films like Splash, Cocoon, Parenthood, and Backdraft, he was offered Far and Away, a sweeping historical epic starring Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. The project promised to elevate him further in Hollywood and test his abilities on a larger, more complex canvas. Yet, the timing couldn't have been worse. His wife, Cheryl, had just given birth to their fourth child, their daughter Jocelyn. Taking the film meant leaving home for 6 months of shooting in Ireland and Montana at a crucial moment in his family's life. Howard tried to manage the distance the best he could, arranging regular calls and occasional visits. But as filming dragged on, burdened by weather problems, production complications, and the pressures that come with a massive period epic, the emotional cost of that absence grew heavier. When he finally returned home after the long shoot, he found that his infant daughter did not recognize him. She treated him as if he were a stranger. For Howard, this moment was shattering. It compelled him to realize that his ambition had cost him an irreplaceable chapter in his daughter's life, one he would never get back. This homecoming proved to be a turning point. Colleagues would later say the experience stayed with him for decades, unsettling the self-image he'd always held of himself as a family-first man. To realize that he'd allowed career pressures to eclipse his role at home created a deep sense of conflict he struggled with quietly, but persistently. It also changed how he approached his career from that point forward. He continued to work steadily, but became much more deliberate about scheduling, fighting for family-friendly production structures, and bringing his children into his work world whenever he could. His daughter Bryce Dallas Howard later spoke about how involved he allowed her to be on set as she grew up. His son Reed also spent time around productions, eventually developing his own interest in filmmaking. His wife Cheryl became a constant presence on nearly every set. Ironically, the project that had required such sacrifice was not even the success Howard had hoped for. Far and Away underperformed at the box office and received mixed reviews, deepening his regret over the time it had taken from his family without offering the professional breakthrough he had envisioned. The disappointment added another layer of emotion to the weight of that decision. It became a lasting reminder that ambition, no matter how well-intentioned or carefully planned, always carries a cost. That moment in 1991 became one of the defining emotional markers of Ron Howard's life. It forms a powerful example of the hidden struggles that shaped the man behind the calm, genial public persona. For decades, viewers saw only the steady rise, the clean-cut success story, and the award-winning career. But Howard's willingness to finally talk about the personal sacrifices behind that journey offers a fuller, more truthful picture. a man who has achieved extraordinary success, but who has also grappled with the same painful regrets, difficult choices, and emotional consequences that come with trying to balance ambition and family in a demanding public career. The rise of Ron Howard from child actor to celebrated director is often characterized as one of the most seamless and charmed success stories Hollywood has ever known. But behind that decades-long public image of stability and steady progress, there was a deeply personal struggle involving his younger brother, Clint. Although both brothers started their careers as child actors, their paths diverged acutely as they grew older. While Ron transitioned to directing and built a commanding creative empire, Clint experienced a bumpy road. By the late 1980s, his addiction struggles had flared, creating emotionally stressful tensions within the family and setting Ron in an anguishing position, watching his brother's life spiral out in a direction he could not control. Clint remained a constant presence in Hollywood as a character actor, with various roles in film and television, often in many of Ron's projects. But behind this steady work, his addiction mounted, menacing his career and his life. Family said later that Ron was growing increasingly helpless in his attempts to support his brother from afar. The same qualities that made Ron such an effective director: discipline, planning, and relentless problem-solving offered no solutions when it came to addiction. In 1990, desperate and exasperated, Ron issued a stark ultimatum to Clint: go to rehab or lose his support altogether. For Clint, the moment marked a turning point in his recovery. For Ron, an emotional reckoning after years of guilt over their diverging fortunes. Indeed, family dynamics experts point out that siblings reared in the very same environment who achieve success at vastly unequal levels often suffer complicated emotional consequences. Ron would later acknowledge that his achievements cast an unintended shadow over Clint, bringing on comparisons neither brother wanted but couldn't avoid. Even when Ron never flaunted that success and made an actual practice of including Clint in his work, he still assumed a personal burden regarding the way their different paths affected the family. This cut sharply against the uncomplicated, sunny persona the public grasped about him. He was not only dealing with the growing pressures of a growing career, but also carrying an extraordinary private emotional weight that few ever saw. These experiences invariably colored Ron's filmmaking. Critics have noted how films like Parenthood and A Beautiful Mind reflect a deep understanding of family struggle, emotional instability, and the complexities of supporting loved ones in crisis. That empathy, they argue, came not from research, but from personal experience. Over time, Clint stabilized and continued his career while maintaining his sobriety, and the brothers rebuilt a healthier, more grounded relationship. Still, the experience left lasting marks on Ron, reinforcing the reality that even a life of remarkable success can be shadowed by private pain and unresolved emotional strain. This hidden family crisis was by no means the only moment that showed the human cost beneath Ron Howard's relentless professional drive. In 1995, he embarked on probably the most physically and psychologically grueling period in his career when he produced Apollo 13. Determined to capture the technical accuracy and emotional truth of the real mission, Howard immersed himself completely in the world of NASA, working closely with astronauts, engineers, and historical consultants. The intensity of the project quickly escalated. His schedule grew more demanding, and perfectionism pushed him into a punishing routine of 18-hour days that stretched on for months. After 90 consecutive days at this clip, Ron collapsed on set. Crew members said it was sudden and terrifying. One moment he was directing, the next he was on the ground, his body shutting down from exhaustion and dehydration. It later became clear that in the weeks prior to the incident, he had been in denial about more and more ominous warning signals. For a period of 36 hours, this forced the production to shut down, a nearly unheard-of pause for a major studio film. To Ron, the collapse was more than a physiological occurrence. It directly contradicted a lifetime-held belief that he could overcome any obstacle with pure will and hard work. This crisis proved to be one of the rare moments of reckoning for someone who, with rare exceptions, had worked almost continuously since childhood. For the first time, Ron confronted the likelihood that his methods, which had seen him through decades, were no longer tenable. Friends and colleagues said that he began to question how much of his identity had become wrapped up in his productivity, whether he had sacrificed too much in a quest for perfection. When production got underway again, Ron made modest but significant adjustments, delegating more and resting for brief periods of time. He remained ambitious and meticulous, but those close to him sensed a new deference to his limitations. Ironically, Apollo 13 would turn out to be one of the biggest successes of Ron Howard's career, receiving widespread critical acclaim and garnering numerous Academy Award nominations. But behind that achievement was the memory of a sobering moment when his drive had almost pushed him beyond his physical limit. The experience reshaped his understanding of endurance, responsibility, and self-care. It marked another shift in his personal development, as profound as the family crisis involving his brother. Together, these secret struggles paint a far more complex portrait of Ron Howard than the public image of the gentle, unshakable filmmaker. They show a man shaped not just by steady success, but by painful, private challenges that forced him to confront his limits and vulnerabilities. By 2018, Ron Howard had long been considered one of Hollywood's most dependable filmmakers, someone whose name on a project signaled stability, craftsmanship, and professionalism. During a career in which he had directed over 25 feature films and collected 2 Academy Awards, he had proven versatile in multiple genres. His reputation seemed virtually unshakable. But when he took over Solo, a Star Wars story, he entered the most challenging and high-risk project of his career, one that would eventually trigger a profound professional crisis. Solo had already been beset with woes before Howard joined production. More than halfway through filming, Lucasfilm had fired the film's original directors, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, in an unprecedented decision for a movie whose budget was nearing $300 million. Howard stepped into a situation that offered no room for error. Immovable release dates, a fractured production, massive studio pressure, and a fiercely protective fan base. For a filmmaker who built his career on careful preparation and control, the chaos surrounding Solo represented the exact opposite environment. He ultimately res hot about 70% of the film, remaking the movie under extremely difficult time constraints. Those who worked with him said he never complained about the impossible circumstances, instead setting about stabilizing the production and delivering something the studio could release with confidence. Despite these efforts, Solo became the first Star Wars film to lose money. Its box office performance fell far below expectations, and critics responded with lukewarm reviews. The disappointment was not just commercial in nature, but held personal consequences. Howard would later say that the financial failure of the film almost ended his directing career. The result was that Ron was confronted, for the first time in his life, with a period of professional uncertainty. Where the offers once flowed, they slowed for the first time in decades. Friends said that he wondered whether his filmmaking instincts were still relevant in a quickly changing industry, and whether studios would still trust him with large projects after such a visible flop. His age did not make things any easier. Entering his mid-60s, a time when many directors begin battling ageism and shifting industry priorities. What had once been a steady stream of opportunities suddenly became a moment of reckoning. What ultimately pulled him out of this crisis was the unexpected guidance of his daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard. Already an emerging director with acclaimed work in projects like The Mandalorian, she helped her father reconnect with his creative roots and remember why he loved storytelling in the first place. Rather than pursue commercial redemption or revisit the laurels of old, Bryce urged him to select projects that truly meant something to him. This role reversal daughter became mentor offered Ron both comfort and clarity at a sensitive moment in his career. This creative reset oriented Howard toward more personal and risk-taking work. Films like Rebuilding Paradise and Hillbilly Elegy marked a transition from the spectacle-driven projects to stories more deeply rooted in human experience and emotional complexity. It was the Solo crisis that made him redefine success, not by box office numbers, but by the meaning and resonance of the stories he chose to tell. The period became transformative, reshaping his artistic identity after decades of professional certainty. But Howard's public challenges during this time were equaled by private pain that few knew about. In 2017, a series of personal losses shook him hard. He lost his father, Rance Howard, and his mother-in-law within months. Both relationships had influenced his life in deep ways. His father was parent, mentor, and creative collaborator to Ron, appearing in many of his films and offering guidance throughout his career. His mother-in-law had been part of his life since he and Cheryl had been teenagers. And these losses struck when he was working on one of the most emotionally challenging projects of his life. While grieving, Howard began directing Rebuilding Paradise, a documentary about the devastating campfire that destroyed the town of Paradise, California. The project had him sit with survivors, listening to their trauma and documenting their grief. As he absorbed their stories, he was processing his own losses in tandem, creating a parallel emotional journey that few on the outside ever realized. People close to the production said they could tell how he was affected, never inserting his own experience into the film nor soliciting any type of sympathy. Compartmentalization had always been Howard's usual professional approach. Since childhood, he had learned to separate personal struggles from his work. During Rebuilding Paradise, those boundaries dissolved. The grief of the community mirrored his own, and his emotional response became part of the filmmaking process. There was a deeper vulnerability, a deeper openness that others hadn't seen in him throughout his very long career. The documentary became the hardest project he ever made, not because of technical complexity, but because of its emotional weight. What resulted was a film told with raw honesty and shaped by a director quietly harboring his own heartbreak. Later, Howard would acknowledge the timing of the project with his personal losses as changing him and allowing him to approach storytelling with that particular kind of depth that is only fostered through real-life experiences. The man long known for professionalism and steadiness found himself creating some of his most personal and emotionally resonant work during a period of profound private grief.